Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us at tonight's meeting about MassDOT's draft FY 25 through 29 capital investment plan. We'll be getting started in just a minute. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Scott. I'm the Manager of Capital Planning at MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning, here to present MassDOT's fiscal year 25 through 29 capital investment plan. And before I get rolling with the presentation, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Chris Clem, who will go over the meeting protocols.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Clem, and I'm one of your MassDOT producers, alongside Miranda Briseno, who will help facilitate the question and comment session. And we'll just take a quick minute to review some of your Zoom meeting controls. On the bottom of your screen, you will find your audio settings. Your microphones are muted during this meeting, but you will have the opportunity to speak during the question and comment session at the end of the presentation by using the raised hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. You can rename yourself by clicking the Participants button to open the participants list, finding your name, and then selecting Rename. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, you can put them in the chat box, and we will address them at the end of the presentation during the question and comment session. If you need to attend the meeting by phone, you can do so by calling 1-646-931-3860 and entering meeting ID 846-2435-2598. If you are having technical difficulties and require assistance, please dial 857-393-1294. Finally, you may view live closed captioning generated by Zoom by selecting the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. This public meeting will be recorded. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation may choose to retain and distribute the video, images, audio, and/or chat transcript. All parts of this meeting are considered public record. By continuing attendance with this recorded public meeting, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. If you are not comfortable being recorded, please turn off your camera and keep your microphone muted, or you may choose to excuse yourself from the meeting. Your microphone and camera are automatically disabled upon entering the meeting. The meeting will be open to questions and answers at the end of the presentation, and your feedback is very important to us. On your screen is the notice of MassDOT's policy on diversity and civil rights. All MassDOT activities, including public meetings, are free of discrimination. If you'd like to learn more about our civil rights policies and how they impact our public meetings and hearings, please contact the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights for any questions or concerns. All questions and comments are welcome and appreciated. However, we do request that you refrain from any disrespectful comments. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks very much for reviewing that material, Chris. Now I'd like to turn things over to our meeting co-host for this evening. We have Ethan LaPointe available from the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. They've been very gracious co-hosts for tonight's event, and I'd like to turn things over to Ethan just to make a few remarks on behalf of the MPO.
Thank you, Michelle, and good evening, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. The Boston Region MPO is a government agency that oversees a transportation planning process for the 97 cities and towns that make up what we like to call the Boston region. Most of these are in eastern Massachusetts, and they span from Cape Ann all the way down to the South Shore, along the 495 belt all the way down to the Rhode Island border. There are 3.4 million people who live within these communities, and an even greater amount of individuals rely on the regional transportation network to go about their daily needs. To support this network, MPO staff work closely not only with MassDOT, but also the MBTA and our regional transit authorities and other partners to identify and research different transportation topics, and most critically and relevant to tonight's presentation, fund the kinds of projects and opportunities that your communities and neighborhoods may have identified as priorities. The MassDOT Capital Investment Plan, or CIP, brings together the local, regional, and statewide priorities to help illustrate what the Commonwealth will be looking forward to over the next 5 years for projects. I would encourage those who are tuning in here tonight to think about not only the projects that you're seeing presented here tonight, but also the kinds of projects that you may wish to see in future development cycles for the Capital Investment Plan, as this is a continuous, comprehensive, and most important, cooperative planning process that we conduct annually. Again, thank you for engaging with the Capital Investment Plan here tonight. The Boston Region MPO and MassDOT hope that you will continue to stay involved in this process, not just for this CIP, but also going forward to help move the Boston region forward. Thank you, and I'll pass it over to Michelle.
Thanks very much, Ethan. So with that, we'll get rolling with tonight's formal presentation, after which we'll have the question and comment period. So I'd like to start off with some overall highlights for tonight's presentation. They include, first at the top, what our capital investment plan is. This is a planning document that guides the planning, construction, and capital maintenance for the Commonwealth's transportation system over the next 5 years. As you'll hear about in the presentation tonight, there are a lot of inputs to this process, but public input and feedback is a very important component. This helps feed and inform the way MassDOT creates its investment strategies for capital investments for transportation, the way we create and fund and support our CIP investment programs, and how projects are ultimately incorporated into the CIP. And finally, we have a draft fiscal year, or FY 25 through 29 CIP available for public review and comment. This comment period kicked off on June 20th and is continuing through July 10th, and we hope you'll review this plan and provide your feedback. So a little bit more by way of overview. This CIP document is something that we update on an annual basis to bring in new information and considerations. And within each update period, we cover 5 years of capital investment. This is a fiscally constrained plan in response to the funding resources that we have available, and I'll talk about more about what those are in a minute. It also will reflect the spending timeline of a particular project or investment within the CIP. So you may see a project carry through multiple years of a CIP and potentially into multiple CIPs depending on its overall implementation timeline. There are a variety of investments related to transportation that are included, ranging from roads and bridges to active transportation infrastructure, state-funded transit items, our statewide rail network, public use airports, investments for the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and other MassDOT enterprise services such as information technology. The diagram on the right-hand portion of the slide highlights how we organize our CIP. It's based fundamentally on 3 main priority areas: reliability, which is really focused on maintenance and improving condition of infrastructure. The next level up is modernization. Through this, we try to upgrade our system to make it safer, improve accessibility, and make it more accommodating to economic growth and vitality. And the final category, expansion, is focused on increasing options for travel within the Commonwealth. And primarily, the expansion category over the past several years has focused on projects to expand the statewide bicycle and pedestrian network and the statewide rail network. To advance these 3 priority areas, we have CIP investment programs in each of these categories. Spending through these programs is designed to, again, advance these areas. And within these programs, which function as buckets for investment, we have individual projects. Now to talk a little bit more about funding, we support the CIP through 4 major categories of funding sources, the first being federal funding. This includes both funds that come to Massachusetts by formula from the various USDOT modal administrations, as well as competitive grant funding that's awarded to MassDOT through processes run by these federal agencies. And one of the things that's come forward in recent years, particularly under the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is the current federal legislation guiding transportation and transportation funding in particular, is a really dramatic increase in the number of competitive grant programs. So as MassDOT applies for these, in cases where there are funds awarded, they are incorporated into the CIP after award. The next category, state funding, includes state bond cap, which is general obligation bond proceeds that are used for a variety of things, ranging from matching federal dollars to supporting grant programs for municipalities. We also have a number of special obligation bond sources that fund particular types of projects, such as for bridges or for rail. For MassDOT, we have our toll revenues that come from the Metropolitan Highway System, the Western Turnpike, and the Tobin Bridge that can be reinvested back into those facilities. And finally, we have an other category that covers third-party, local and municipal contributions to transportation projects, as well as trust funds like the Central Artery Project Repair and Maintenance Trust Fund. So as we were developing our 25 to 29 CIP, there were a number of factors, as I mentioned, that were shaping our process. We've categorized them here into internal and external categories. On the external side, we have the ongoing implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, as I've alluded to. This not only has guided the level of funding for transportation, but also changes in programs and policy, such as an increased emphasis on climate and resiliency. Our plan development is also shaped by the availability of Commonwealth-provided funding and the level of revenue collection on our tolled facilities. Through our planning, we're continually trying to respond to emerging travel demands, conditions, and needs, especially as we continue to progress out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Partner agency planning processes are a big contributor to the CIP, and I'll talk more about that a little later in the presentation. And of course, as I've alluded to, feedback on both past and current CIPs informs our process. On the internal side, we have the priorities of the Healy-Driscoll administration with respect to transportation. These include things like partnerships with municipalities, an increased emphasis on safety, and of course, enhanced emphasis on climate considerations, especially with the creation of the new climate office under the administration. At the MassDOT level, we have a number of planning initiatives. You may be familiar with the recent development of the Beyond Mobility statewide long-range plan. The public comment period for the plan actually wrapped up very recently, and MassDOT is in the final stages of considering that comment that was collected and proposed responses. So this plan, as it was being developed, had some influence over the fiscal year 25 through 29 CIP in terms of priorities, and you'll see an increased emphasis as we continue to develop new CIPs over the next several years. We're also guided by other MassDOT strategic planning initiatives, the outcomes of our modal and asset management plans, performance management systems, and other identified process improvements. So again, this CIP investment focus areas slide highlights 4 major areas within our reliability, modernization, and expansion framework that we focused on during 25 through 29. They allude to many of the Healy-Driscoll administration priorities that I mentioned previously, including safety, climate stewardship, both on the decarbonization and resiliency side, asset management, and partnerships with municipalities. And we have advancing social and geographic equity as a cross-cutting theme for all investment areas. I'd like to talk a little bit more about some other influences on CIP development, kind of coming down a little from the major strategy side to more of the program and project level. So when we're thinking about particular investments to include in a given CIP, when we're looking particularly at the reliability area, we're guided extensively by asset management systems maintained by MassDOT for monitoring the condition of bridges and pavement. When we're considering modernization and expansion projects, project selection criteria, which may create rubrics for goal areas such as economic vitality or environmental stewardship play an important role. And of course, we continue to look at the status of the project, whether it's been initiated through a MassDOT project development process, where it is within its design or implementation. All these factors figure into when and how we can include a project within the CIP. And I do want to return to partner agency planning processes, particularly those by the MPOs or Metropolitan Planning Organizations. What I want to highlight in the diagram on the right-hand portion of the slide relates to the work that MPOs do to develop transportation improvement programs for the respective regions that they serve. And again, MPOs are responsible for decision-making about how federal funds for transportation are spent in their respective regions. And these decisions are captured in the transportation improvement programs that they develop. So the diagram highlights the fact within the overall CIP, the green boxes reflect the MPO-related components of the steps. So they include both highway-oriented projects as well as a state match for federally aided transit projects. Within that diagram, the remaining boxes in blue reflect other parts of the CIP. So this illustrates that overall the decision-making that happens at the MPO level has a really strong influence on the overall makeup of our capital investment plan. So with that, I'd like to encourage you, if you're not already involved in your particular region's MPO process, definitely encourage you to participate in that, as well as other public engagement efforts through MassDOT, because this all feeds back into the development of the CIP. Talk a little bit about the development timeline. Again, we developed a CIP approximately over a 9 to 10 month period. The colored bars on this chart show the major steps involved. You can see that each one extends for a very long period, and this reflects the iterative nature of the process as we get new information, not only about our funding levels, but about the status of projects, about decisions being made by our partners, et cetera. We're now in that maroon stage of drafting, supporting review of, and finalizing the plan, with again our comment period running from June 20th to July 10th. The stars on this diagram highlight major interaction points with the MassDOT Board of Directors. They're ultimately responsible for review and approval of the CIP. Back in June, they voted to release a draft CIP for public review, and we anticipate that they'll take a vote regarding the proposed final CIP at their July 17th meeting. So this chart, or series of charts, represents a dashboard of sorts of spending within the 25 to 29 CIP. The top table organizes the spending by the 3 major priority areas, as well as by MassDOT division. You will see that there is some spending for the MBTA highlighted here, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later within the presentation. The table on the bottom right highlights spending, again, in the 3 major categories, as well as additional spending for Chapter 90 and Planning and Enterprise Services. You can see in that center column that we have approximately $6.5 billion in investments for the CIP. And the donut chart on the lower left highlights relative spending by priority area. You can see that approximately 61% of investments are focused in the reliability category, with another 23% focused on modernization. A little bit more details about what's in the CIP. We have over 50 individual investment programs and more than 1,600 individual investments. That number is actually probably closer to 1,700. You can see in the chart on the right our top MassDOT CIP programs by spending, with the bridge program at $5.4 billion being far and away the largest. And again, this is focused on replacing, rehabilitating, or otherwise improving bridges throughout the Commonwealth. Others in that top 10 category include pavement investments, Chapter 90, roadway improvements, and bicycle and pedestrian improvements as well. We've introduced a number of new programs within the 25 to 29 CIP. They include one focused on freight movement, one that will provide grants to transportation management associations, as well as a water transportation pilot program for communities in the vicinity of Boston Harbor. Our draft plan includes approximately $847 million in investments for the MBTA, and it's supported by approximately $269 million from federal competitive grant awards. To return to the key focus areas I spoke about a few minutes ago and highlight some spending within each. Within the safety and asset management categories, I've already talked a little bit about the bridge program. We have over $500 million dedicated for public use airport improvements throughout the Commonwealth. Safety investments are integrated throughout many of the programs in the CIP, but we do have a designated program for systematic road safety improvements to advance some of the priorities identified in Massachusetts Strategic Highway Safety Plan. On the climate stewardship side, we think of these investments in roughly 3 categories, the first being providing alternatives to car and truck travel. And here we're providing, to support that, we're providing over $550 million in programs focused on active transportation and improving bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Another $439 million in our statewide rail network, which is focused on providing alternatives to moving people or freight using that rail network, and then another $370 million in investments in RTAs and local transit providers. With respect to resiliency, we have $82 million dedicated in a highway resiliency program focused on things like culvert replacements and flood control improvements, and then another $89 million focused on providing charging stations near major roadways. And then finally, the partnerships with municipalities, over $1.3 billion in grant programs. Talk a little bit more about that particular category. The table on the right portion of the slide highlights planned spending for Chapter 90. Again, the largest of our grant programs, but also a number of other supplementary programs, including the long-standing Complete Streets program, the Local Bottleneck Reduction program, which supports municipalities in addressing areas of congestion within their communities, spending for municipal pavement and small bridges. And this latter category is particularly designed to help communities address bridge needs that may not be eligible for federal funding, depending on the bridge's size. And then the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which was initiated during the COVID-19 pandemic to enhance street spaces for bicycle and pedestrian movement, for outdoor dining and economic vitality, as well as to improve transit access. Even though we're emerging from the pandemic, this program has continued to maintain popular, and so we've continued to maintain our support for it. You can learn more about each of these individual programs through MassDOT's new Grant Central online portal, which provides details about the programs, how to apply, and provides a customer service interface for working with MassDOT staff on applications and awards. Now returning to talk a little bit more about state-funded items for the MBTA. As many of you may know, the MBTA creates a separate CIP that covers its investments from all funding sources. MassDOT CIP and the separate MBTA CIP do overlap in terms of capturing Commonwealth-funded transit investments, and this particularly refers to projects that may be funded by Rail Enhancement Program funds or state bond cap. And so, as I alluded to earlier, we have about $847 million in that Commonwealth-funded category for the MBTA. Some examples of projects include bi-level commuter rail coach procurement, funding for South Coast Rail, over $300 million for Red and Orange Line vehicle procurement, the water transportation pilot program I alluded to earlier, and other investments. So the next couple slides highlight some investments specific to the Boston region. Again, this is not by any means meant to be an exhaustive list, and I'll talk a little bit later about how you can explore the CIP for finding out more about projects of interest, including those in your community. This is meant to highlight some selected projects that vary by their scale, by their location within the region, and by their mode type. I'll just also note that the spending values here reflect the planned spending within the 25 to 29 CIP. The total cost for these projects may be larger depending on whether the spending is happening at the beginning or tail end of the project. And again, you can see more details about total cost within the CIP document itself. So this first slide highlights some roadway and bridge examples, including ongoing maintenance work for the Tobin Bridge, a variety of locally oriented intersection and bridge improvement projects, such as the targeted safety improvements on Broadway and Chelsea, and improvements at the intersection of Route 1 and University Avenue in Norwood. Other major investments include the ongoing bridge work for the I-90, I-95 interchange rehabilitation in Newton and Weston, as well as beginning spending for the McGrath Boulevard construction project in Somerville. On the climate and resiliency front, we have some examples first on the transit electrification side with vehicle and infrastructure electrification improvements spending for Metro West Regional Transit Authority, as well as drainage and culvert replacements for flood mitigation happening in Wellesley to address some of the statewide resiliency needs. There are a variety of trail and bicycle pedestrian projects within the CIP. Some highlights here include the State Road Beachmont Connector for Revere and safe routes to school improvements at the Cottage Street School in Sharon. You can also explore the CIP to learn more about other air, rail, and transit investments with the air and rail not appearing in MPO tips. So CIP is a great place to learn more about these. Include runway reconstruction work happening at the Beverly Regional Airport, as well as grade crossing repairs on the Framingham secondary line. So winding down here, I'll talk a little bit more about the CIP document. Again, this is available at mass.gov/CIP, particularly on our Developing the Capital Investment Plan page. This is available as a PDF as well as an Esri story map. The story map has some interactive visualizations within it that you can use to explore spending by programs and other areas of interest. The main document covers how we put the CIP together and some investment highlights. Appendix A focuses on CIP projects, which are organized by MassDOT division, and then by municipality or facility in the cases of the other modes. Appendix B focuses on CIP investment programs, and you can learn more about spending levels and more details about the programs that are included in that portion. We're in the draft phase right now. We're working towards a proposed final CIP that will be shared with the Board of Directors. One of the main components this will include, in addition to any proposed spending updates, are the results of an equity analysis of MassDOT and MBTA investments. So to talk a little bit more about public engagement that we're doing during this comment period, this is, again, we are holding a series of public meetings around the Commonwealth. We've held a number of them already. This is our second to last tonight. We have one more happening tomorrow night, specifically focused on the Northern Middlesex and Merrimack Valley regions. If you know anyone who is unable to make it this evening but would still like to comment, they are definitely welcome to provide feedback on any aspect of the CIP at the meeting happening tomorrow night. We're also, continuing to coordinate with our MPO partners as well as working with the legislature. We've held a legislative briefing on the CIP back on June 24th. If you're interested in providing comment, there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. We accept comments, of course, here tonight during the question and answer period via email at masscip@state.ma.us. You can write us letters, and the details for the address are available at mass.gov/CIP. We also have a web-based comment tool that I'll talk more about briefly. And all of this feedback will be aggregated and shared with the MassDOT Board of Directors and used for considerations for development of the final CIP. And again, you can hear more about that at the upcoming July 17th, board meeting. So one of the tools we have for providing public comment is through the MassDOT Project Viewer, which provides an interface for providing CIP comments. Once you filter to projects of interest on the main page, you can open up the project-specific window. On the right-hand side in that blue box, you can identify the public comment button. Click on that, and there'll be spaces for you to input your name, email, and comment on specific projects. So this is another opportunity to really dig into and explore projects that may be happening in your area and to provide specific feedback. So how do we use the feedback that we collect on the CIP? It's important to note that we share it throughout MassDOT divisions and with our planning partners, particularly the MBTA. We consider this comment in different ways depending on the topic of that comment. Feedback we get on projects that may be planned or underway and are already included in the CIP are shared with MassDOT divisions to support project development, design, and implementation. Comments on projects that are not yet included in the CIP are helpful for us and individual MassDOT divisions to understand the level of public interest in that particular project, and they can also be a way of kind of kicking off that project development process if it hasn't been initiated as of the CIP development timeframe. Going up a level to programs and priorities, we look at comments about our investment programs and the priorities that they support. This helps us shape whether new programs are needed, how those programs should be sized, and other aspects of future investment decisions. And of course, we welcome broader comments about the CIP development process, including comments about how we can communicate better about the CIP and make it more understandable. So I'll close the presentation talking about something that's a little bit tangentially related, but does come around to feed the CIP. This is the Massachusetts Travel Study, and right now MassDOT is collecting information about daily transportation habits from households throughout the state to understand how people are using roads, highways, transit, and other options to meet their travel needs. This helps understand how these facilities are being used today and how we can improve them in the future. And again, that informs our ongoing understanding of transportation needs, which supports transportation policy development and does go on to influence the content of the CIP. So the Massachusetts Travel Study has invited households to participate at random to get a good sample from throughout the state. If your household has received an invitation to the study, we hope you will participate. You can learn more at the Massachusetts Travel Study website about the study and how it will be used, as well as more detailed questions about how to provide your responses, rewards your household will get for participating, and other aspects of the study. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation remarks and look forward to hearing from folks during the public comment period. And to get that going, I'll turn things back over to Chris to talk a little bit about the question and answer procedures.
Thank you, Michelle. For our virtual attendees, to ask a question verbally, please use the raise hand icon, and we will give you access to unmute your microphone. Please state your name and share only one question at a time so everyone has the chance to participate. You may also submit written questions or comments to the host using the chat panel, and we will read them out loud. To ask a question on the phone, dial *9, and we will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number and unmute your audio. Before we move on to questions and comments from the public, we would like to invite any elected officials participating tonight to provide a first opportunity to ask questions or provide comments. So with that, if there are any elected officials joining us tonight, please feel free to identify yourselves in the chat or in your name, and we will give you the opportunity to speak. I see Joe Comerford has come on screen. Welcome, Senator. You should have the opportunity to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. And I'll be very brief because I recognize you're focused in Eastern Massachusetts, but I couldn't make the Western Massachusetts event. So I will submit much more extensive written comments. Let me just start by thanking MassDOT both for these opportunities, but also for your work in general. MassDOT's work in the Hampshire Franklin Worcester district, which is what I represent, is really nothing short of miraculous. And I'm very, very grateful for the team there on the ground, as well as, of course, statewide. So I just wanted to call attention to 42 highway projects that have been included in the draft 2025-2029 CIP. I want to thank you for their inclusion. I'll list them in my testimony. I also want to lift up a number of projects associated with the Pioneer Valley and Franklin Regional and Montechusett Regional Transit Authorities. I know you know these, and I support their work. I also want to thank you for your investment in rail infrastructure in Western Massachusetts and the Orange and Turners Falls Municipal Airport. With regard to rail, I would just say that we are very much hoping for a completion of a Northern Tier or Route 2 rail study. Again, MassDOT has done a wonderful job facilitating that process. We are waiting on the last chapter of that. Once it's complete, I know that everybody I work for out in Western Massachusetts would really appreciate MassDOT's consideration of Route 2 or Northern Tier rail as an opportunity, not only for Western and Central Massachusetts, but certainly for Eastern Massachusetts as well. Also, in Western Massachusetts is a project that MassDOT knows well, which is the Shell Bridge reconstruction. I know that this is a a bear of a program, but the Northfield keeps sending us back to try to get it right. And so I will be, back in partnership with MassDOT, trying to figure out the way that we can really actualize this significant hope. So with that, I'll just thank you again for this opportunity and submit written comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator, both for participating tonight and for your feedback. And we will, your remarks tonight do echo a number of the comments that we received from folks at the Western Massachusetts meeting. So, looking forward to seeing your letter and going from there. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, Senator. I do not see any other public officials with us this evening. So with that, I will turn to members of the public. John Walkie, you have permission to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is John Walkie, East Boston resident, and I work at Green Roots Environmental Justice Organization in East Boston and in Chelsea. And in looking through the plan online, I was just having a hard time pulling out projects that are related to climate resilience. Not so much the electrification and that sort of thing, but more along the lines of, you mentioned some of the highway projects having additional drainage work or larger culverts. In particular, I'm thinking of commuter rail lines running along especially on the North Shore, but there's a significant investment on the part of the state to the municipal vulnerability program that municipalities like Chelsea are implementing to prevent flooding. And there's basically, a hole in the wall where the water gets in, and that's basically the rail right of ways that cut through not only Chelsea, but through Revere and many other municipalities, where there's a need to either shore up those areas. And I'm just trying to figure out, I'm sure there are lots of studies and different smaller projects that address bits of this issue, but I'm not capable of finding exactly where there's a discussion of a sort of holistic analysis of the resilience of our commuter rail system in the face of both coastal flooding and then inland sort of increased rainfall and things like that, where that could be and where I can find more information on that.
Thanks very much for your feedback, and I really appreciate you raising the point. I think it can be challenging, especially at the project level, to really emphasize the resiliency-related components in cases where that work is integrated with part of a larger project that may address also things like safety or state of good repair. So I think that's great feedback for us to think about CIPs going forward. With respect to those projects on the rail system, MassDOT CIP primarily focuses on like portions of the state-owned network and that do somewhat to some extent overlap with commuter rail. A lot of our investments on the rail bridges program, for example, incorporate aspects of culvert improvements and related resiliency. But again, I can appreciate that, reviewing the projects within that program may not necessarily highlight all of the resiliency benefits that they may bring. So that's something we'll definitely take back to think about how we can address that better going forward. I will emphasize also that there may be additional information and details covered on the MBTA side to the extent that these are projects serving the commuter rail. So that's an additional portion of information to look at as well. And I do want to take this opportunity to highlight as part of our broader planning process around resiliency, we're working to integrate information from flood risk assessments that are taking place for different areas around the state, and that can be a resource and opportunity for us to bring that information forward more fully in the future. So again, thanks again for raising that point of feedback.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you again, John, for your participation this evening. I'm going to move on to Dan. Dan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, folks. I'm very happy to see a lot of the movement that you guys have done here so far. I live in Charlestown, and our community is being squished by a lot of regional traffic also trying to get into the city of Boston or just into other areas within the region. Um, I think we need to think about isolating another entity within the MPO, the Boston MPO, that is more focused in the residential areas of Boston and how they can be more effectively taken care of from a transportation perspective. We seem to be stuck here with a huge Everett flow and a Somerville flow, all trying to get through us, and yet we don't seem to be able to get across one small road called Rutherford Ave, and that is creating a serious hardship to us. Now, I know there's movement of flattening it, which is the worst thing that could be done for the community here. We need to find a better solution than flattening. We actually had it. We spent a lot of effort on the 2019 design, and I really think that's the right answer. Now, to serve Everett and their needs, the orange line, spur line would be the better solution. But I don't know how we're going to be able to get there if we have to do piecemeal with bad concepts. So is there any way we can get together as a small entity of, for Everett, Charlestown, East Boston, and maybe even Lynn areas? Maybe we need to get together in a smaller group to really hash this all out of what makes sense for all of us and then work from there. I don't see that happening. I see a lot of effort in very small focused areas, but not in the big scheme of things. And we seem to be missing the point of transit, because transit has to be not exclusive, it has to be inclusive. So let's see if we can do that, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your feedback, both on that broader collaboration between municipalities within the wider Boston region and for the Rutherford Avenue project in particular. And we can, definitely continue to relay feedback about the designs for Rutherford Avenue to that team. I do want to also highlight within the Boston region, I know that part of the seats within that board are covered by the subregions, and then there is an inner core committee subregion that I believe covers a number of the municipalities that you listed, and as a possible venue for some of those discussions. Ethan, I don't know if you want to share anything additional, or happy to leave it there.
I think that covers everything there. Thank you, Michelle. We also have the TIP Process Readiness and Engagement Committee that is supplementary to other MPO engagement opportunities. So,
thank you again for your feedback and participation tonight.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Ethan. And thank you very much, Dan, for those comments. All right, we're going to move on to Andy. Andy, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name's Andy Witter, and I'm the airport manager at Westover Metropolitan Airport, as well as the vice president for the Massachusetts Airport Management Association. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft MassDOT 5-year capital investment program for fiscal year 25 through 29. We greatly appreciate the assistance and support we receive from the MassDOT Aeronautics Division. The draft capital investment plan for the Aeronautics Division proposes a total of $577 million over a 5-year period that focuses on reliability and modernization of the 35 public use airports across the Commonwealth, including Westover Metropolitan Airport. The draft CIP provides funding for a number of critical local projects, including the reconstruction of Taxway Sierra with new LED lighting and signage at Westover. The proposed capital investment funding will assist eligible FAA Airport Improvement Program airports to leverage federal funding for high priority safety projects. In addition, the proposed funding is critical to support numerous statewide airport programs such as airfield markings, airfield crack sealing, vegetation management, airport system planning, airport administration buildings, and airfield security projects such as the security cameras that were recently installed at Westover Metropolitan Airport. These programs will greatly assist in enhancing safety and security at all 35 public use airports, including the 10 privately owned public use airports that play a critical role in our statewide system of airports. According to the 2019 MassDOT statewide airport economic impact study, the statewide system of public use airports in the Commonwealth provide nearly 200,000 direct and indirect jobs with an economic output of over 24 billion annually. And on behalf of Westover Metropolitan Airport and the Massachusetts Airport Management Association, we respectfully request that MassDOT Board of Directors support the proposed $577 million capital investment program for the MassDOT Aeronautics Division. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comment, and we will definitely be sharing that with the MassDOT Board of Directors and with the Aeronautics Division as well. And I know we have some members of that team here tonight.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you very much for your participation. Moving on, Adrienne, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Adrienne Nunez. I'm with the Massachusetts Municipal Association. First off, just want to say thank you so much to MassDOT, to all of you for all that you do to help to ensure that residents and visitors are able to safely and easily make their way across the Commonwealth. So thank you so much. And thank you very much for your ongoing partnership with municipalities. Also, just want to mention very quickly some appreciation for the governor as well as the legislature for recent increased investments in municipal roads and bridges. And that's really the baseline for my question. I really have just a clarifying question for you. I'm wondering if you could speak briefly to the proposed additional $20 million that is included for the Chapter 90 program. As well, if you could help me to identify where in the CIP there is the $25 million that has recently been authorized through the transportation bond bill for the rural roadway funding program.
Thanks very much for your question. So the 20 million that's above previous 5-year levels of Chapter 90 authorization is supporting the spending under the, I believe this is the, as part of the Rural Supplemental Chapter 90, we were able, through our coordination with the Executive Office for Administration and Finance, to fund that program at approximately $5 million a year. We began that additional $5 million a year per funding under the Rural Chapter 90 authorization starting in FY24. As part of revisiting the draft into the final CIP, we know that that authorization has been extended, and we're looking at opportunities to provide additional funding in fiscal year 2029. So that's currently where the authorization and that spending is reflected.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you for your questions, Adrienne. If you have any follow-up, or if anyone else has any follow-up, please feel free to raise your hand once more. At this time, there are no raised hands, so I will just remind folks that the CIP public comment session is open until July 10th. And I do see a raised hand from John. John, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks. Just two very quick questions. One, well, one of them's really quick. You referenced an equity analysis report that will be coming out. I was just wondering when we could expect to see that or keep an eye out for it. And the second question, relative to this activity of a capital investment plan, I'm just curious as to where I should look. I just brought up the MBTA's capital investment plan, and it actually has a number of some of the information I was looking for. And now I'm also up to my nostrils in the environmental status and planning report from MassDOT. And I'm trying to find the missing link between what the region is doing for both highway and transit planning around Greater Boston and the airport development plans, just because there is a bit of a gap in our transportation planning going from Logan Airport going up to about the 128-95 split. So in that area going north, where there's lots of confused main plates driving through Route 1 in Saugus trying to get their way back to 95. And I'm just curious as to where the planning is actually happening. Like the capital investment plan might have some evidence of projects that support it, but where should I look to actually see what the state is thinking of for how do you get people from the north to Boston and Logan Airport?
Sure, thank you for your questions. The first one regarding the equity analysis. So we conduct that equity analysis during the public comment period. There'll be a discussion of the results of that analysis as part of the July 17th board meeting. So a significant portion of our CIP presentation will focus on those results and how we're proposing to respond. So you can tune into that board meeting to learn more about that. And we do, in the final draft of the CIP, do include a discussion portion of the document that touches on that equity analysis. To your second question, the CIP describes funding going to planning activity at a very high level within MassDOT. Studies and research are conducted by MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning, which also houses my team, the capital planning team. So the studies specific to work that's happening in different, not only for different modes, but for different areas of the region are highlighted on the Office of Transportation Planning website. And any of my colleagues know more about the title of the pages offhand, and we could probably certainly follow up in the chat or afterwards with that. There's links to pages about different studies that are going on, different reports that have been generated in recent years. So while the CIP, describes the funding going to planning work at a high level, the MassDOT website will have more detail about individual studies and activities related to planning for the transportation system.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for your questions, John. We are working on pulling a link of something relevant to post in the chat as we speak. So we'll hope to post something very soon. And I got the thumbs up. Thank you.
So maybe while my colleagues are doing that, I do want to highlight that one of the other ways we handle public comment that you'll see in the coming weeks, following the conclusion of the capital investment plan process, we do post a comment summary matrix on the CIP website. This will highlight different themes of public comment that we heard throughout the engagement process, different types of feedback that we received, as well as MassDOT's response to that feedback for this particular capital planning cycle. So definitely check back, later in the summer, and you should see that matrix available to see how comments were responded to. And I do again want to thank you all for attending tonight. Happy to take another couple questions if folks have any, but we do really appreciate your participation in this process. Okay, and if there are no other comments this evening, I thank you again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your night. And thank you again to our MPO colleagues for their support for this meeting.